I switched to my headphone mic and then back to this, just to if there was
Oh, okay.
something weird that happened when I was
It almost sounded like there was interference or something. Like it was like, I don't know. Who freaking knows? Yeah.
something, huh?
I don't know.
Weird. I don't know what that would be. Is that fun to listen to? Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I am Michael Gray.
And I am Erin Green.
Hello, Erin Green.
Hello. Can I get a mic check?
Check.
Mic check. Check.
Check. Are you talking? Just kidding.
If you've listened to the last episode, you can understand why I'm asking this, because I've had problems with my good mic reading and my AirPods overriding that. And, you know, my type A personality comes out that we don't have the best audio for you guys. So
yeah.
But it wasn't bad. Today's better.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I would be frustrated too if it were me, but being on
but
this
you're
side,
perfect. So
well, I'm glad I didn't have to say it.
But thank you for recognizing that.
It just
Erin.
would have come across as just really, arrogant and
conceited. I know.
And I feel like being humble is one of the best things about me. So glad I didn't have to do that.
One of the benefits of being perfect is that you're also humble.
Oh,
so,
incredibly humble.
Right?
You have no idea how humble I am.
Let me show you.
Probably one of the most humble people you've ever met.
I'll announce how humble I am to the world.
Oh God. Yeah. Anyway, no, I get it. But like editing, and stuff this week, I was like, yeah, it's totally listenable. It's not a big deal.
And it was a great discussion. Yeah.
It was a good discussion. Yeah. So normally we record on Wednesday. So last Wednesday, 2 days ago, we recorded, what was the topic? It just fell out.
Okay. We talked about some of the internet memes and sayings and like the common like fitness diet
Abs
culture
are made
sayings.
in the kitchen. Yeah.
Yes.
Which was
get on our nerves.
We talked about as soon as we were done recording, we're like, oh, that was really good to get a lot of that stuff out.
I know.
And then today, so we're recording on Friday, we're doubling up this week. Today's episode is probably going to be pretty cathartic too. And so this is going to be like a good week for Erin and I. We're getting out all the demons.
Yeah, exercise the demons, man. It is fun though, because I mean, sometimes when I get a little bit of that release when I talk to clients about some of the just misinformation and diet culture kinds of, misleading sayings and things that cause people to have like a jacked up relationship with their bodies and food and, whatever, or think that they need to follow a specific eating pattern. I do get some of that release talking with clients, but it's so much different when you talk with another professional who's like in the space and hears it, like if you hear a client come to you and say, well, I read this, or I heard that, or I'm thinking about doing this with my fitness routine or my diet. And you're like, and so you have to explain it all. Yeah. We're simpatico.
Yeah. And, you're not going to go off on a topic while you're on your client's time either,
I know.
Let me get on my soapbox for 30 minutes and you just sit there and listen.
Right.
Speaking of which, I think we need to just do a whole thing on this. Like you mentioned this morning, but I posted something this morning that could piggyback on the whole abs are made in the kitchen episode. But this guy, I don't even know if he's in the fitness and nutrition world.
He has what are the verified symbol or whatever, the little blue check mark. Something. So he obviously has a ton of followers and is, I don't know, pretty prolific in the social media space.
Yeah. And his post was, I saw this on Twitter, was something to the effect of carbohydrates cause obesity, the end.
It was just like, period. Yeah. There's no nuance.
And I wanted to find him and light him on fire. I was like, what in the world?
Yeah,
like, first of all, nope. Second of all, shut up. Please shut up.
Yeah. And that's the kind of misinformation that people are
Mhm.
just confronted with all the time.
All the time.
And then the messaging, so the really interesting thing about that is people don't have to believe that statement
Mhm.
for it to somehow plant a seed and take a little bit
Absolutely.
of root to where all of a sudden when we're working with them and we, I mean, maybe they're not completely avoiding carbohydrates, but they just have it in their mind that I shouldn't be eating this, or this is taking me further away from my goals, or this
Right.
isn't a healthy food. All of a sudden
Or I can eat
that
them, but I kind of shouldn't, right? Right? Will you
exactly.
let me in on
Yeah.
the secret?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know this isn't a good, I know that's not the best. That's what I hear all the time with carbs. I know that's not the best. I know this isn't a good choice. And
Right.
I'm like, why isn't it? Like, where did that come from? And you really have to kind of stop and think about how these messages have just been so widespread. And everywhere you look, it's carbs. Carbs are the bad guy, which, if you were back in the 80s and 90s, fat was the bad guy.
Mhm.
So it's just really interesting to see how fad diets have shifted over
Right.
time and how that messaging that is always just kind of planted like little seed by little seed all of a sudden creates this belief system for people. So
Yeah.
yeah, we could talk for a few episodes on this
And we might.
topic. Might be some swear
Yeah.
words, not family friendly.
The funny thing was, and we can move on, but in his Twitter feed, his evidence for it was to like was posting uh, a study on
Mm,
a dietary study where when people drastically reduced their carbs, they lost X amount of weight.
mm,
It's like, oh, okay.
right.
So that's your proof that, then carbs cause
Yeah.
obesity
He needs a little bit of a lesson in the hierarchy of
and not
research
being
and
dumb.
yeah, and how association doesn't equal causation,
Right.
and how if you eliminate a food that, and we talked about this in our plant-based episode, it's not
Hmm.
necessarily the elimination of a food, it's the increase and addition of
Yeah.
what is filling that space. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's and
It's
one
like I ate a
study,
sandwich for lunch
one
and then I got a
study,
flat tire. So don't eat sandwiches
sandwiches cause
because you'll get
yeah.
flat tires.
And did
Yeah.
you know that everybody who drinks water will die?
I know, right? It's true.
It's so right.
So
Water
I don't know.
obviously causes death in some
That's why I only drink
weird
whiskey.
way.
Just playing it safe because there's been no known, correlations with excessive
with,
alcohol
with
consumption.
people who I know, right? Oh boy.
That's what our
I know.
ancestors used to do. Oh no, anyway.
I know.
Yeah. Okay.
So
So
we obviously need to have more discussions about this kind of
I
thing so
think
we
we do.
can exercise the demons a little more often.
Clearly, we have a lot to say on stupid things. Yeah. So let's jump in, huh?
Yeah.
You want to?
So this is episode 40,
I think this is 41.
41.
Yeah, it's
We are
crazy.
we're super close to that
So
52,
close
which
to
will
a
be the
year.
year mark.
Yeah, I was editing episode 40 just 2 days ago, and I was like, "Holy crap!"
I
Like that's
know.
just 12 weeks away, and we went from episode 1 to 12 really fast. Like it felt
I
like,
know.
"Holy crap, we're in double digits already." We just
Yeah,
started this thing. Like we're gonna be at a year before we know it. I'm
I
real
know.
freaking excited about
And
that.
I have to say, I'm really proud of us for being so consistent with our recordings. And that's something that Matt has said, when you had the power outage and all of that craziness, um, Matt was like, well, this will be the first week that you guys miss a recording, right? And I'm like, but we have not missed a launch. So
Mhm.
we always had, like, Michael and I work really hard to have a bank of at least, one or two
At least one or
podcasts
two.
kind of
Yeah.
in the rotation so we can make sure that you guys have a new podcast every week.
Yeah.
And yes, we have missed one. I will say I think we released one episode like a day late, and Matt's cousin actually called me out on it. He texted me the next morning. It was like, "Where the hell is my podcast?" And I was like, sorry, we forgot to make it live. So it was
Right.
already
It
in
was like on a
staged. We just
Tuesday.
forgot to make it
Yeah.
live. So yeah, I feel really good about what we have
Me too.
created here. And huge thank you to all of you listeners, because we wouldn't have this if it weren't for our audience, and we
Right.
love it. And
Like, yeah. And I remember talking about before we started, or right when we were starting kind of recording and launching, like, man, what if like 20 or 30 people listen to this.
I know.
That'd be so awesome.
More than just our moms and our spouses and families.
It's been way past that the whole time. And we'll have to figure out something fun to do for that 1 year anniversary. But it's just, I'll probably say this again. And I promise we will get to a topic today.
Yeah, you can listen to this like 1.5 times speed because we're just BSing.
I love doing this so much. Like it's so much stinking fun. Like yeah, I really enjoy you, Aaron, and I always have for a long time. But just like getting to do this with you is just a blast, and getting to put out information that's so counter to a lot of bad information that people have just had been beat over the head with for their entire lives is so rewarding, and it's just freaking fun. Like I'm glad we're still doing it, and we don't have any intention of not doing this anytime soon.
I mean, in fact, we want to grow it, and that maybe is a topic for another. Maybe we should kind of talk about that at another episode, just some of the ideas we have for how we want to develop this and where we want to go with it. But here's a little fun tidbit. I actually got an email through my website, a request from a potential client who lives in the UK, and said, "I found you through your podcast."
Oh, that's cool.
What? Right? I was like, well, wow.
Well, I didn't know we were international.
I know.
This changes everything.
I know.
So much for being humble.
I know. So, that's just exciting because we can see through Anchor, it kind of shows you like which countries, people listen to your podcast, but to actually have interaction with people around the globe that are listening and they really like the message, and hopefully they will maybe share it with a friend. It's a cool feeling.
It's a really cool feeling.
I like it.
It's very,
and I believe in what we're doing. And so it's,
I think that helps a lot.
Cool.
Like we're just not doing something that we think will
make money or
market well,
be popular.
Yeah. This is everything we say are things that we really truly believe in and enact in our own lives, and it's how we work with our clients, and yeah, it's just fun. All right, so let's get to the show.
Yeah, you guys, you can start really listening now that we're
30-minute intro. Actually, I think that's like a 20-minute intro.
That's okay. I think people like that we're real people, and it's not just this curated
fake people,
discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
So today's episode.
Go ahead. You want me to go ahead? I can go ahead.
Well,
you can go ahead.
I can. Yeah, I can share a little background.
Let's say it at the same time.
Do you want to talk over each other?
Just for the rest of let's just make this the worst episode ever. 30 minutes of no content and then just confusion.
We're going to lose listeners after all of that. So I'll just share a little bit about maybe how this topic came out. And then of course you have some, good perspective on this as well. So I was talking with a friend a few weeks ago, and she, we kind of brought up the podcast and we're talking about it, and just different topics and things to talk about. And she mentioned that she listens to Dax Shepard because she listens to quite a few podcasts. And so we were just talking about which ones we like. And Dax Shepard just started this little spinoff called The Race to 270. And we'll get into that a little bit later, exactly what it is, but it's basically having two friends race. One is trying to gain weight to 270 and one is trying to lose weight to 270. So then we start talking about weight competitions. And of course, a weight loss competition is a very popular thing these days, whether it's in the workspace, whether it's through a gym. I know that our local healthcare system does it. Obviously there's a show based on it that's wildly popular, The Biggest Loser. So we got to talking about this, and I have one experience that, again, I will share later in the podcast with it wasn't a weight loss competition through my work, but it was weight maintenance. And then our favorite show, The Office, has 2 whole episodes devoted to this, which I had texted you when I saw that episode. It was way back in season 5. And I was like, oh my gosh, we should talk about this on the podcast because they do everything wrong. And of
Yeah.
course, they do it with wonderful comedy. But I
Hmm.
was like, we should talk about this. And here we are. We found a way to weave it in. So that's kind of how this came
Imagine
about.
that. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about. Like, yeah, just kind of the um challenges, or maybe the things that aren't so favorable about weight loss challenges, how some challenges could be beneficial depending on how they're approached and all that kind of stuff. So, I'll say this. So, my first experience with a weight loss challenge was when I first started training. So, it was in January because it was like a New Year's thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm going to say like 12 years ago, something like that. The gym I was working at, they had a Biggest Loser competition. And this was like at the height of the Biggest Loser. This is when it was just like one of the most popular
Right.
shows on TV. um, and I was super into it as a new trainer. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I love
Yeah.
seeing these people losing weight, and it's so great. And it took me a few years to kind of figure out, like, maybe that wasn't so healthy. But it was right at the height of that. The gym was kind of capitalized on that show because it had a Biggest Loser competition. And it was, I want to say, like 2 or 3 months, something like that. And people had to come in and weigh weekly. They had to pay a certain amount of money, and then a certain percentage of that went to first, second, and third place. So there was a prize, a cash prize, and I think there were like some sponsors, so there were like some other things that went along with it. um, but so that was kind of my first experience with it, right? And what I noticed that I didn't really recognize until later on was one of those, like, maybe this isn't a good thing.
Yeah.
Was just like people coming in for their weekly weigh-in, right? They had to come to the gym and do it, and they'd get on the scale, and with just such anticipation, right? Like,
Mm,
okay, here we go, and then they'd hop on, and then depending on what the scale said, they were happy or miserable, right? Like
yeah. It
it
would
was one
make
or
or
the other.
break their day.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they were like, okay, yes, down a pound, or I didn't lose any weight, I'm a terrible person. And then they would
Mm-hmm.
inevitably say, whether they were happy or not happy about it, like, oh, okay, well, I've done this and this and this and da 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 da. Da. And listening to people say what they had been doing for the previous week to prepare for their weigh in was always like, really? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
no, you should probably not be like really hungry for hours at a time. I don't think that's good. Or, like wow, you're like working out 3 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you have kids. When do you see them? Like,
Right.
it just started to begin to see, like, oh, okay. So there's a real motivation. And I think this is one of the biggest drawbacks that these contests have, is when there's a prize and an end date, then what matters is winning the prize. What matters is winning the contest and getting the prize. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if what matters is winning, well, you're going to do whatever you got to do to win. Right. And that's what you begin to see, is people just like eating hardly anything, excessive amounts of exercise. Just, what can I possibly do to intake less and burn more? And
Yeah.
that's the whole point for most of these competitions, right? Is figure out, how do you eat less and how do you move more?
Yeah.
So
And
with no health at
yeah,
all in
to
consideration.
any extreme.
Yeah.
And
Because you don't win by being healthier, you win by being lighter.
yeah. Yep, exactly. And
Right.
I think that's probably at the crux of this whole conversation, is what is being achieved through this weight loss competition. And I mean, I'll just start by saying that I think a healthy dose of competition can be really helpful for people.
Absolutely.
And it can be motivating. It can, inspire you to take action. It can, I mean, I've even worked with couples who agree to hold each other accountable in some way and kind of compete, like who can include vegetables the most days this week, or who can stick to their alcohol limit, or whatever their thing is that they have decided to embrace. How can they kind of work together to sort of leverage that into a healthy competition?
Right.
So I think that there can be a good place for that. Um, I think a couple things are making sure that the goals in that competition are health-based
Right.
and not just
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the outcome you're after is weight loss. All right,
Mhm.
cool. We always come back to what are the things that will help you be healthy
Mhm.
along the way and possibly will result in weight loss in the end game. You know, like let's really focus on those things.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, if you just really focus back on the behaviors and the day-to-day things, that will result in that weight loss if weight loss is right for you and your body,
Right. Yeah.
which is a whole nother consideration.
Sure. Yeah. Well, no, I agree. I think a lot of people do thrive on that competition, and it's that being competitive is something that they naturally are,
Mm-hmm.
and so to have sort of like that, an external motivator out there can be really beneficial. But like Aaron said, I think, when that competition becomes problematic is when it's not centered around a healthy activity, or when that
Mm-hmm.
activity has potential to be unhealthy. Like if you're like competing with a spouse about like, okay, I'm going to get 3 veggies every day this week, I'm going to beat you. That's
Right.
fun. You're not going to be harmed by eating 3 veggies a day. You
Right.
know what I mean? Um, but when we look at when weight loss is the only point,
Mm-hmm.
well, if weight loss is the only point, I said something like this earlier this week. If weight loss is more important than health, then dangerous options are always going to be on the table for you,
Yeah.
right? Like if
Yeah.
that's all that matters is losing weight, regardless of how I feel, which is how most people go about this. It's like screw how I feel, screw my health. I need to be in a size X. You know what I mean? I need to be at whatever. Then options that put your health at risk are always going to be ones that you'll probably consider,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not important. And I think that's what we see with these weight loss competitions. And then not only that, but the way people go about losing weight in these competitions most often set themselves up to gain all that weight back once the
Mm-hmm.
competition's over, because nothing's sustainable. There's no tools or no skills, there's no habits developed. It's white knuckling to the end. And then once it's over and they win their $300 or
Right.
whatever, 2 months later, right back where they started, or
Yeah.
worse, which is
Yeah.
a byproduct of kind of what they've done to their metabolism through this process. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And your post that where you specified like that is always an option for you. If you really decide that weight loss is your end game,
Mm-hmm.
you always have that option to go back to whatever practice that is, be it healthy or unhealthy. And it sounds pretty counterintuitive for if you listen to Middleish, that's not something Michael and I would just throw out there, and just throw people to the wolves and say, do your thing. But I think what it does for the person is, first of all, it honors their autonomy. Like you have a choice here, but you came to me with a clear need for something different. And usually people are asking me for sustainable practices, how they can feel better, how they can enjoy the foods that they've been cutting out for years. There's a lot of moving pieces that I get from these inquiries with people. And so I will present to them like, look, you've been on a number of diets. You know how to lose the weight if you really want to,
Mm-hmm.
but it's pretty clear that hasn't worked for you in the long term. And
Right.
so let's talk about what can work for you in the long term. And let's talk about if weight loss truly should be the focus
Right.
for you.
Right.
So I think that is a really good point, and it segues really nicely into how these weight loss competitions, and we do have some funny stuff because obviously we have The Office and Dax Shepard and some of our own,
I'm
assessments.
here.
Michael is our comic relief. Um, so there, I think there are a lot of examples that we'll bring up and talk about this. But just back to The Biggest Loser real quick. I want to share a link in the show notes to this YouTube video called Poodle Science. I went to a conference years ago where a dietitian came and visited with us, and she was on The Biggest Loser. She worked with the show for, I think it was 3 years or something, that she
Oh,
worked on the
wow.
ranch with the people. So it was a fairly long-term gig. She had enough experience with the different
Yeah.
contestants to know how things were put into practice. And she said she really started after the first season, she really started having the feelings of the first season that she worked on, she started having feelings of kind of, this doesn't reconcile with my ethical, you know, um, practices and my beliefs toward
Mm-hmm.
helping people be healthier, because it truly was just based on weight. And then you get the sensationalism that goes
Mm-hmm.
into television. Anyway, back to poodle science. She shared this wonderful video, and I've actually come across it from numerous different, professional interactions with different practitioners. But it
Mm-hmm.
basically explains, like, why would we expect, they use dog breeds as an example. Why would we expect people to look like a person that is not the same, like,
Right.
makeup genetically, or they don't have the same lineage, they're not from the same background, they
Mm-hmm.
have all of these different, we're all humans, we're not robots. So poodle science just uses dogs, which makes it super cute,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot more relatable, because it's hard for people to show
Yeah.
themselves, a little bit of grace through this
Right.
whole thing. But the dietitian that gave this presentation after we watched the video, and I encourage you guys to go watch it, um, she said she felt like there's a scene with the poodle that's standing there with the clipboard and is like shaking her finger at the mastiff, the dog that's sitting in the corner,
Mm-hmm.
just full of shame, and like covering its eyes with an empty dog dish next to it. It's like, it's actually kind of heartbreaking to watch. But it just shows, like, these poodles in this little video are going around kind of making all of these dogs try and conform to them and what they
Mm-hmm.
should look like, and with disregard to the breed of the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's poodle science. That was my sort of epiphany with understanding that some of these people who have worked on shows like The Biggest Loser have had their own day of reckoning, where they're like,
I'm sure.
this does not fit with my philosophy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, and just I mean, the whole point of that show is to celebrate being smaller,
No,
you
totally.
know? And sure, I mean, a lot of these people have start the show and they're like, I have these health implications because of, for me, the weight I'm at, and I feel like they will be better if I lose some of that. But that's not what's talked about. That's not what's celebrated. That's not where the prize money goes. That's not what they, evaluate each week. It's step on the scale and let's see how worthy you are. Oh, only 12 pounds this week. Sorry.
Which is
Jimmy,
another.
Jimmy lost 23. So, and people are like heartbroken and disappointed in themselves and talking to the camera after of like, I don't know what I did wrong. I worked so hard and I only lost 9 pounds. It's like, holy crap, you lost 9 pounds in a freaking week? That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Like that is wildly unhealthy.
Right.
That alone, and people are upset about it. And then it's celebrating being smaller. That's the whole point of these things. And I just think there's so much damage that is done just, in people's psyches and how they view themselves and how they feel like they fit in the world when there's so much celebration. F health, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't matter at all. I don't care if these
Mm-hmm.
contestants are healthy. I don't care if who wins is healthy. I don't care if he feels good. I just want to see something dramatic, right? And that's all we care about. And so that's all we resonate with. And it's just so freaking damaging, and
Yeah.
it's just so hard to see. And I get so frustrated by this mindset, but I 100% understand anytime anyone is find themselves caught up in it. I get it. Like
Yeah.
you're beat to death with this messaging that weight is all that matters, and it doesn't matter if you go to extremes and jeopardize your health, because you'll be smaller and then you'll be good. You'll be
Yeah.
happy. People will like you better, and you'll love yourself more. You know, it's
Yeah.
ugly.
I know. And I think the first couple times I watched The Biggest Loser, like you, I was fascinated with the methods and how, these transformations that people went through. And I remember watching it when I was in college, and my boyfriend at the time was also in dietetics and fitness, and we were studying together, and we would have conversations about What do you think is going on behind the scenes, and how healthy do you think this is? And what happens when these people go home and they don't have a trainer and this super rigid structure?
They can't
And,
work out 10
you
hours a
know,
day.
I mean, it's kind of like how people say with drug addicts, if you go back into that environment with those people and that's those surroundings and those circumstances and all of the familiar things that got you into drugs in the first place, it's going to be infinitely harder to continue on your path to healing. And I think, a lot of people who are morbidly obese, like those who appear on The Biggest Loser, probably
Mhm.
have some kind of disordered eating going on, which could easily be put on, an addictive type of, spectrum. So I think it's a similar kind of situation where put these people in almost like a rehab, like they go to the ranch and they have everything like
Mhm.
measured out and given to them and done for them. And you have basically a really rigid exercise schedule and all that stuff. And then let's just send you back home and let you do your thing. It's, yeah.
Yeah. Could you hear what just happened?
I just heard a child. what's
It's,
what's happening over there?
so Sophie is 4. She's 4.5. And she just screamed from upstairs, "Mommy, I went poop."
Oh, good job, Sophie.
Come wipe my butt. I'm done. Come
Hey,
take care of it. Yeah.
it should be a proud moment. Pooping it feels really good and it's
The best.
exciting,
Yeah.
especially if you're only, what is she, 4? So
Four and a half. Yeah.
she's only had a few years of really acknowledging that she's been pooping. So it's probably pretty exciting for her. Once she gets to be our
Yeah.
age, she'll be like,
Yeah.
another day.
She's calling Kathleen up there to come wipe her butt. That is her standard. We've been working with her like, you don't need to scream across the house. Like if we don't aren't there in 2 seconds, like just wait. Like we're coming. We heard you. Trust us, we heard you. I think the neighborhood heard you. We're on our way. Just give it a second. Because she'll be like, Mommy, I went poop. Mommy, I just like stop. So I don't know if that picked up. It was really loud in my
I just heard,
headphones. I really
I'm
hope
not
that
sure.
it caught.
I really hope that it actually landed on the recording because that's
I hope so
entertaining.
too.
All I heard was a child kind of yelling, and I'm like, there's Sophie. Like, I don't know what she's yelling about, but the fact that she's
Just
yelling about
pooping.
poop is just
Yeah.
like,
Just pooping.
yeah.
Yeah. Keeping it real here on
Oh,
Middleish.
all right.
Okay.
So
I just totally
I
lost all my train
that's
of
okay.
thought with that.
I want to talk real quick about this podcast that I'm listening to with Dax Shepard, and the Race to 270. So
Race to 27, right?
he's got his childhood best friend named Aaron, who is starting out at 306 pounds. And Aaron has gone through AA. I think it's about this was kind of recorded around November. And so it was a year that he had been sober in
Mhm.
November. So I think that's important to note because a lot of what we hear with Aaron's side of the story is, I think, related to addiction
Mhm.
and some of that all or none type of thinking that goes into it. And then the competitor is this guy they call Perfect 10 Charlie.
Perfect 10 Charlie.
So in the first episode, they're talking about Perfect 10 Charlie is like a firefighter and like this just symmetrical and handsome and like perfect physique kind of guy.
Mhm.
He owns a gym in LA. He is super into diet and fitness. He's I don't know if he's done like a number of bodybuilding competitions, but I mean, this is this guy's life. So he's very much into manipulating his body in different ways and just kind of doing some self experimentation with his weight and his musculature and all this stuff. And so he starts out at 240 pounds. So the idea is to try and get Perfect 10 Charlie up to 270 or Aaron down to 270. And whoever gets there first gets $5,000. So
Wow.
they, and I mean, it's one of those things that it is sensationalized. If you know Dax Shepard, this is a very adult podcast. There's lots of F-bombs, there's lots of sexual innuendos, there's lots of talk about just, very adult concepts through this podcast, and it's sensationalized. Like, it really is just, how can we make this, interesting for people to follow?
Sure.
Which I think is part of what people really love about some of the, people love a good competition. And this one just happens to be about
Yeah.
weight loss gain.
I mean, the idea of a wildly popular show based on a weight loss competition sounds ridiculous. Like, who's going to watch that? This isn't interesting, but it is when you make it real sensational.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that, so they specify in the first episode that the highest perfect 10 Charlie has ever gotten to is 260 pounds. And it was a muscular 260. And he has specified that he's going to try and do this in a manner that's not just like pounding so many calories that he just puts on a bunch of fat, because I mean, it's in his best interest to take care of his body too.
Sure.
And they talk about that, like, this is kind of unfair to Charlie because he actually is a very health conscious guy, and he's really into fitness and health and nutrition, yet he's engaging in this concerted effort to really steadily gain weight. And we'll talk about some of the strategies and the things they talk about. But he has agreed not to do the whole drinking water, for the weigh-ins to try and manipulate, which I have a story about that one. But he really is trying to do this in a, and still going to the gym and still, just really lifting in a manner that really promotes hypertrophy of the muscles, so growth of size of the muscles, but not like burning too many calories, right? And then Aaron, really interesting. The first couple episodes, he's pretty candid about how challenging it is to change his eating habits, but they just sound like pretty blatantly unhealthy. I mean, by any standard, just the amounts of foods. And there definitely sounds to be some strong emotional and coping mechanisms going on with food and eating, disregarding his hunger and satiety cues, choosing foods that are just very highly palatable and easy to overconsume. And they talk about, as the episodes go on, I'm not all the way through. I think there's like 6 episodes right now, and I'm maybe halfway through the 5th one. But it's really interesting to hear them talk about, there's a lot of diet culture themes going on through this. And I would invite people, if you haven't listened to this and you've heard a lot of what Michael and I talk about with, diet culture and moderation and all this other stuff, I would really invite you to, if you're interested in listening to this, just listen for like picking apart some of those things that we have mentioned and go, okay, I can see how this is probably happening for this person. And I wonder if this might be, a different approach, or if this would maybe be more helpful. But it's quite fascinating.
I bet. Was that it?
I
thought there
giving
was a
you a
lot more
chance to
coming.
respond. I can give you a lot more.
It's
So
like, that's fascinating.
one
Go,
of
Michael.
the,
It's like, oh, I thought there was more story.
I've been talking a lot. So I was taking a breath and giving you a chance to respond,
Well, okay, then I'll say some things.
but I have more.
So no, I think that would be really interesting to go into. Maybe I'll do this too, but go into that podcast and listen to it with that intent of like, okay, what's maybe not being done so well? What would be that might be like actually a really good like practice for a lot of us, a lot of you listening too. Like, okay, let me go in from this perspective and go like, what would be better here? What could be done differently? What's not sustainable? That actually might be really interesting.
Yeah. I think that I like that, that approach, like thinking, what could they be doing better? What's more sustainable?
Really good learning experience.
For example, one of the things that they have said is, so Aaron, who has been through AA and continues to go to meetings and obviously has some food challenges with his relationship with food. talks about on day one how he lists like these foods that he ate, like Chinese food and all this stuff. And of course they're kind of laughing. I mean, it's
Mhm.
wholly humorous and like lots of comedy and kind of poking fun and quite a bit of satire going on in this podcast. And so he makes fun of himself all the time, is
Mhm.
self-deprecating, like, yeah, and then I dove into the Chinese food and I just decided he got into that all or none thinking where, oh, well, I've already had Chinese food. I might as well just keep going. And something Dax mentions later on, because Dax has been through rehab as well, is acknowledging that in addicts that all or none thinking is super prominent. And so if somebody, like they're talking about Thanksgiving, and it's easier just for him, Aaron, to not have stuffing at all on
Mhm.
Thanksgiving. And then Monica is the co-host for Dax on his Armchair Expert podcast, and she's on this one too. And she actually has um, what sounds like a pretty pragmatic and balanced relationship with food, in terms of just she doesn't have that, uh, you know, personality where she has to go all or none or
Mhm.
overboard. And she's like, well, can't you just have a little bit of stuffing on your plate and like enjoy a little bit of it, but then fill your plate with all of this other good stuff and the fiber and the color and whatever. And Dax and Aaron are both like, no, moderation is not a concept that comes easily to addicts.
Sure.
And so they're talking about like just how for them it's so much easier to say, nope, I am not going to eat this food. I'm not going to tempt myself. I'm not even going to take that step, because it quickly becomes this like, oh, I've already, and we talk about that on here,
Mhm.
where I think that black and white thinking gets people, trips people up a lot, because they
Right.
think like, oh, I screwed up one thing, it's
Mhm.
over, I might as well just go all the way.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think that like, we talk about moderation a lot and that being middle-ish concept, but that can look like different things to different people. I think sometimes when you've lived so far to one extreme for a long
Mhm.
time, that moderation may be living on the other end of the spectrum for a while, right? Because there's such a
Mhm.
draw and pull to this side that maybe landing in the middle for a while, maybe that's not a good option right now. Maybe you need to be more strict and rigid till things kind of balance out and you get some distance from that. So I get that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it depends on the situation too. Like, yeah, if you've been an addict and like, okay, well, once in a while, it's like, no, you
Right.
just can't, you don't get to anymore, and
Right.
that's the approach that needs to happen. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that.
Um, it's something else they talk about is just these tactics to help Aaron feel full. And so I mean, the whole like, oh, staying away from carbs and stay like he won't even really allow himself to have popcorn, which I'm like, popcorn is a whole grain. It's very filling. It's very,
It's pretty low
lots.
calorie.
Yeah, it's lots of volume. Like you can eat
Yeah.
a lot of popcorn and feel like
It's
full
one
and
of my go-to
satisfied.
snacks for people like in the evening. Like
Yeah,
have a cup
totally.
or two. It's
Have some
almost
popcorn.
nothing. And you get
Um,
crunchy and salty and buttery and yeah.
exactly. Yep. And so, and Monica points that out. She's like, well, popcorn can be a very healthy food and people can eat that. And they're like, oh no, because I go like the muy buttery and like whatever kind of popcorn. So they're talking about how can Aaron stay full, which first of all, that means he is going hungry.
Right.
And one thing I am listening to this and wishing that somebody would do with Aaron is like, let's get you back in tune with the different types of hunger that you're experiencing, whether it's a physiological hunger, and
Mhm.
let's get you back in tune with those cues, because everybody's body is capable of those signals. It's
Right.
just we often don't listen to them. And then there's habitual hunger. So that's the whole, oh, it's time to eat lunch, it's
Right.
noon. And then there's emotional hunger, obviously, which seems to be a pretty big factor for him.
Sure.
So Dax is like, you could just eat like keep deli turkey in your fridge, and whenever you get hungry, just eat a bunch of deli turkey. And one of the things, and Dax even says, like, this isn't the race to lower nitrates. This is the
Mhm.
race to 270. So I mean, there he's acknowledging this isn't a race for like a healthier way of eating. This is strictly
Mhm.
a weight loss or weight gain competition. So they do acknowledge that and they poke fun at it. Okay. But the whole eating turkey until you get sick of it. It's like kind of eating the same thing. Um, Two, they talk about how protein is so important during periods of weight loss. And this is something Charlie speaks to a lot because this is his industry. And so
Mhm.
Charlie actually does have some, I think, some pretty grounded, reasonable kinds of comments on, well, this is a tactic you could use, and so it's pretty interesting to pick up on those little nuggets throughout the way too, because they talk about intermittent fasting a lot. And Charlie's like, well, if you stop eating around 8 p.m. and you don't eat breakfast until 7 or 8, you're already fasting. So,
Yeah.
he has that kind of just
Yeah.
very, practical approach. But the turkey thing is something that Aaron seems to be enjoying because he does get sick of eating it. So he doesn't want to keep eating something he doesn't, he's kind of bored with.
Mhm.
The protein is filling. The protein is important for maintaining lean body mass during the weight loss. And so that is a tactic that he used.
Mm.
Of course, the intuitive eating side of me is like screaming and dying a little bit inside because I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's so much more that we could be working on here. But
Yeah.
um, they acknowledge
Well,
it.
and that brings up a good point that being healthier for long term is not the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sensationalism, because that's not sexy. That's no one's gonna tune in to hear someone like, hey, I ate more vegetables this week
Be
and
moderate in
I
their
really
approach.
listened to myself when I was eating and, honored my body. Like, because that's not sensational and you can't make that sensational, And so you have, again, the point is not to be a healthier person. The point is to, you know, change your weight and to make it sensational. Yeah. Which
Yep.
I just think, going back to it, that's kind of the point of all of these contests are designed in this way is that's the objective, which just reinforces for a lot of us that that's really the only worthy end goal is
Mm-hmm.
to be smaller.
Right.
It doesn't
And
matter
when,
if you're hungry or tired of food
yep.
or if, I mean, none of that. Just get smaller.
And when people talk about tricks, like what are the tricks? And this kind of goes into the Office, the 2 episodes of The Office that talk about this weight loss competition, The Office, where I mean, they go through like every trick in the book to
Mhm.
try and strictly lose weight. Like it is not about being a healthier version
Right.
of you. And one of the things that really stands out to me in those episodes is that Michael Scott is always about like, you know, weight loss is good. Like in
Mhm.
his eyes, weight loss is good. It's better. In
Mhm.
fact, he gives that presentation where like if you um oh, what Angela says something like, my doctor wants me to gain weight. And he's like, you will die.
You will
Like,
die if you gain weight. And then Jim's like, what? I'm going to lose 70 pounds. And he's like,
yeah,
good.
good. Yeah. He's like, go for it.
Jim,
So I think
who's built like
I
me, would
know.
probably literally die if he lost 70 pounds.
I know. And then they do a really good job of going through all of the crazy things that people will do
Mhm.
strictly to lose weight.
What's your favorite?
So
Okay, let's say
yesterday
favorite. I'm using the term favorite loosely. Okay, these are all
yeah, because
terrible, horrible
it doesn't
things,
make me happy, but it
but it's a comedic show. So what was your favorite?
so I think I'm looking at my notes. I had to take notes, you guys. Michael probably has these 2 episodes memorized, but I Kelly she's got so many issues, that girl.
Mhm.
She goes on this cleanse where she's
Mhm.
just drinking like this weird concocted water lemon
Cayenne
thing.
pepper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, first of all, she turns into basically like this former shell of herself and she gets super snappy and
It's
in the
hollow
office and
eyes, and they're
yeah,
all
and they like
dark.
put the makeup around her eyes and she's kind of like, she just looks really sunken. And, the office stuff has the footage just kind of showing people, from third person. And then they have like the face on interviews and it shows like some of her, different things going on in the office and how she's losing weight. And then she's being interviewed by the camera and she goes, I look amazing. And she
Amazing. It's
looks
like
like
all
a
hollow.
freaking zombie. And she's like kind of all glistening and sweaty because she's
Hmm.
so stressed and her hair is all kind of thin. And so to me, that's just, it's not funny. I know it's not funny, but The Office just makes it funny. And I do find that humor is a really helpful, for me personally, I relate really well to poking humor at things that are just so absurd that, like, can
Hmm.
we just laugh about this, how
Exactly.
absurd this is?
Yeah.
And to me, this speaks to the whole, you can be totally miserable, but I look amazing.
Hmm.
And that's what, and okay, who defines what amazing looks
Right.
like anyway? But then how many people have fallen victim to that messaging, that just as
Hmm.
long as I look a certain way, that's what matters, not how I feel, not how I
Hmm.
respond to my, work or my situation, my relationships. It's just, I look amazing.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
me, that's one of my favorites, tongue in cheek.
I think one of my favorites also with Kelly is when she says that Creed got her a tapeworm from Mexico. And then it cuts to Creed. He's like, that wasn't a tapeworm.
Well, and then when they have this discussion, so it goes too far. People are doing really crazy things to lose weight. Like Dwight drops Phyllis off in the middle of this horrible neighborhood and forces her to walk back like
Like
5 miles to the
miles.
office. And he's like, but you burned 1,000 calories.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. Andy's wrapped in like garbage bags and turn up the heat. So he just like sweats like crazy, losing water
Yeah.
weight.
Oh, so my experience with a weight, not a weight loss competition, it was a no gain November, I think was what this was when I worked at the health department, and the wellness committee, before I was on the wellness committee, decided to do this no gain November challenge, where the idea is just you maintain or lose if that is your goal, but the emphasis was not on that. It was just on no gain. The first problem with this is they didn't have like a percentage of wiggle room because your body weight varies every day,
Right.
and so
Sometimes
the
wildly.
diet,
I've had 5 pound changes in
yeah.
a day. 5 pounds
Oh,
in a
yeah.
day.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. When I worked with football players, they would have 10 pounds in it, just depending on hydration.
Hmm.
So the dietitians in the office and I were kind of like, rolling our eyes at this and not too thrilled. Um, but we were like, well, there's a gift card on the line. It was a pretty nice gift card. And we're like, we can do this. So I remember walking by my coworker's desk one day, went by her office, and she's got a jug of like an empty orange juice gallon full of water. And
Hmm.
she's like, she looks at me and she goes, it's weigh-in day, and she's just chugging this water, and I'm kind of laughing because we're totally just showing the flaws in this kind of competition, right?
Hmm.
So she chugs this thing of water and goes in and gets weighed, and then I went in and got weighed, made sure I was well hydrated, and then I think it's like the whole month of November, right? So we just like ate normally, didn't weigh ourselves, didn't really care. um but then the morning of the final day of the weigh-in, I did my usual morning swim, and then I went and sat in the steam room at the Y just to make sure that I that I came in. So I get weighed, and I think I was down like 2 pounds from the the original weigh-in.
Hmm.
And the gal who weighed me, I don't need to lose weight.
Yeah.
I know that. I'm very comfortable with where I'm at, and it's a healthy, maintainable weight for me.
Hmm.
And this was when I was competing professionally too. And so it was really important for me to stay, well fueled.
Right.
And she goes, oh, and you even lost weight. That's great.
Like,
Really?
why is that great?
Really?
Yeah.
I don't again, it was one of those like really frustrating situations where yes, I participated in it. And yes, part of it was to just illustrate how flawed this kind of thing
Hmm.
is and how you can rig the system. But then after that little experience, I was like, this is just wrong. Like the
Yeah.
whole emphasis on weight loss is good, just is wrong.
Regardless,
Mm-hmm.
regardless, like someone who has no understanding of you or where you're at, or if that would be a good or a bad thing or a neutral thing, or if you want it or anything, but you lost weight. So, wow, well done.
Yeah.
You did a good, honorable, noble, worthy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of jealous of you. Like there's this assumption, this inherent belief that like just weight loss is always good. It's
Yeah.
always good,
Yeah.
and even to the point where like if people are maybe like need to gain weight for health reasons,
Mm-hmm.
that concept when people are told that like what
I know.
your doctor said you need to gain a little bit of weight, like
Yeah.
was he drunk?
Lucky you.
Like
Lucky you is what,
what's wrong with
yeah.
your doctor?
You
Oh
can
yeah.
eat whatever you
Oh
want.
yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I wish I had that problem,
Right.
which is what a
I know.
good thing to say. But
Yeah.
it's just that's, I mean, this sums up diet culture is that your health does not matter. That's the messaging. Health doesn't matter. It's not even part of the equation. It's
Mm-hmm.
not even anything that is asked of you when you've lost 2 pounds. Like, hey, is this a good thing? Are you happy about this? Is this a healthy thing
Mm-hmm.
for you? It does not matter. It has no place in the equation. It's you're smaller, you're lighter. Good job. You did it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're beating the odds and you're a good person.
Well,
That's what it
and
says.
I'm thinking about this scene on Back to the Office, where obviously Kelly seems to have like the most drama going on, the most extreme measures going on
Yeah.
in this thing.
Always.
And so they have this meeting where finally they're like, no, we need to not weigh in this week because people are going to extremes and it's not healthy. And Michael Scott comes in and does this just totally awkward and socially unacceptable presentation on fat acceptance. And Kelly finally decides that she is going to allow herself to eat again and to not pass out and get on IV fluids and all these other
Mm-hmm.
things that happen throughout this, these 2 episodes. Well, in the meantime, she goes in the break room to eat her lunch. And in the meantime, they find out that they're only a certain number of pounds away from one of their other branches in this
Right.
competition. So then they double down again and they're like, we can do this. And that's when like the thermostat gets turned up. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
starts wearing trash bags and they do all this crazy shit. And Michael Scott walks into the break room and Kelly's finally allowing herself to eat. And looks like she's eating pizza or something. And she's just eating. And he walks in and goes, is that health food? And she's like, no. And he goes, put it down. And he just starts
We're
yelling
trying
at
to win a
her. And
contest here.
I'm just like, oh my gosh, it goes along with what you were just saying, how, weight loss is always the healthier goal, where in this scenario, her eating is the healthier goal. And like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's
She's drinking cayenne pepper and lemon water and getting a
right.
tapeworm she thinks from Mexico. And now she's like, hey, I'm going to eat something and I'm going to enjoy it. And it's nope, you're
Right.
doing the wrong thing.
I know.
Nope,
Well,
get
and
smaller.
isn't that a great message for people to be getting too? Like there's this constant just you're always doing something wrong, or there's just like we started talking about with the whole carbohydrate thing at the beginning of this, like people are always getting these messages that like this is the wrong thing to do, or they hear one thing and then they hear another thing and they're kind of conflicting, and so they're like, what the hell am I supposed to do?
No clue.
So
Yeah.
and
Because
when
there's
it comes
so
to
much conflicting messaging in their fitness and
Mhm.
nutrition industry. I mean, so much for anything that someone's believes is probably an opposite
Yeah.
that's spoken just as loudly and just as popular. It's insane.
Right. And which is why when people are only focused on weight loss, sure, there's all kinds of like tricks and ways to achieve that and things you can do and different strategies. But if you really focus on the health of being a healthy human,
Mm-hmm.
we have literally decades of research that points toward a lot of very basic things like moving your body more. And I mean, just with this, other podcast I'm listening to, the Race to 270, some of the things that this guy is experiencing, Aaron, with his weight loss journey is like he's trying to create scenarios to live in the food world with like his kids where they want certain foods that he has chosen to omit, fast food or chips or some of his trigger foods, and he's finding ways to navigate that are getting easier and more sustainable for him.
Mhm.
He's moving his body. He's learning how to cook things like a chicken breast. He learned the first few times he cooked chicken breast, it turned into like this, what Dax call it, a roll of paper towels or something, it gets dry and flavorless and terrible. And so he started learning like how I can cook this better and actually make it taste good to me. So I was like, that's a win because he's learning new ways of preparing foods that are good for him and that actually taste good as
Mhm.
well, which lends itself to sustainability.
Absolutely.
So,
So I just had this thought that, so I think this maybe this is a good illustration of how prevalent like diet culture is and how prevalent the idea that weight loss is the only thing that matters is that if, let's say, scales didn't exist, like they weren't a thing, there was no way to know how much you weighed. I think a lot of people would have no clue how to measure if they're quote unquote getting healthier or not. They'd have
mm-hmm,
no idea.
mm-hmm,
And I think that's probably true for a lot of people because
mm-hmm.
that's the only marker they ever use, you know? And if they didn't have the ability to track that, I think they'd be like, I have no idea.
Right.
No clue. Like if
And so
scales all
that's
of a
a,
sudden went away, they'd be like, how
mm-hmm.
will I know? How will I
do
know
you ever,
if, yeah.
do you ever ask clients if they say, I want to be healthier? Do you ask them, like, what does healthier look like to you? Describe
Yep.
that. What does that
Yep.
feel like? What do you think it looks like? What are some things that happen
Mhm.
in your day? Do you ask
Mhm.
clients about that?
Yeah. I always like on like initial evaluation, it's like, hey, why'd you contact me? What are you wanting to get
Mm-hmm.
out of this experience? Let's, kind of get some goals. Um, and people used to say like, oh, be healthier, which my thing, well, what does that mean? Because I'm not going to assume
Mm-hmm.
what be healthier means to you. And you don't want
Mm-hmm.
me to assume that. And that's pretty broad. And how are either one of us going to know if you're healthier? So what does that mean? Um, and I don't know if it's just that people like lately, people who are reaching out to me are just more familiar with kind of the way I do things and what I'm about. But I've got this less and less, still sometimes, but definitely more often in the past. Weight was number one. you know
Mm-hmm.
Lately it's more like, I want to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a health marker. I need to get my blood pressure down or my cholesterol, or I have asthma. I'd like to be able to use my inhaler less, that kind of stuff. I'm getting more of those things, and I think it's maybe because people are more familiar about what I'm about now. Many
Mm-hmm.
times I've said, like, I don't care if you lose weight. Like, that's not on my checklist at
Yeah.
all, but still people will be like, and I wouldn't mind losing a few pounds,
Yeah.
like,
Throw
let me
that in
say
there.
these things. But if it happened, I
we
wouldn't be upset.
we talked about that in our episode, Everybody Wants to Lose Weight, because
Mhm,
that's something that I agree with you that I think more and more people are starting to really embrace what it means to be healthier as a whole person and not
mhm.
just focus on the weight. But it still is a very common driver for
Yeah.
people, and still something that I'm very upfront if people want to just lose weight off, that's their focus with me. I'll let them know, like, that's not necessarily how I operate. Now,
Mhm,
a lot of the things we will work on, I am very confident you could lose weight
mhm,
in the end if you have weight to lose because of these
mhm.
practices. But that is not going to be our focus. We are not going
Yeah.
to weigh you every week and make sure that you're, towing the line.
Right.
That being said, I do think that weight can be a nice accountability tool for some people
Mhm,
and just something to observe. And that's how I tell people, if they choose to weigh themselves as they're working with me, okay, I'll support that and we'll talk about it
right.
as much or as little as you want.
Mhm.
Um, and we'll also try and turn that into a pretty neutral piece of information.
Absolutely.
So you are not, like you said, it could make or break someone's day
Mhm,
if they come in and weigh and they're up a pound or, whatever, or if they're down a couple pounds, all of a sudden they're like superhuman.
mhm.
And let's try and neutralize that thought process a little bit. And let's just use this as a piece of information and take
Absolutely.
a look at, and I might even play the what if game. Like, okay, if you do, with people that maybe have a history of disordered eating or something, and
Mhm.
we're really not wanting to do that regular weigh in, I might say, well, what might you change if the scale says this? What might you change if the scale says this? How do you anticipate feeling if the scale says
Mhm.
this or that? And we'll kind of like walk through some scenarios. And so they have a little more grounded, um, and maybe less emotional reaction to things,
Yeah.
and they kind of think things through it on a more logical kind of level.
Yeah. Yeah. And a couple things I like to do in those situations is one, and sometimes this takes se- several times of bringing it up, but it's to take a break from weighing, right? Like, okay, so
Mm-hmm.
you've done it daily or weekly or whatever for a year or 20, literally. Like, what if we just take the next month and we just don't? And let's just really put that energy into how am I feeling? What are my behaviors like? What's my consistency like? How's my energy? Just that kind of stuff. And just begin to tune into all these other markers that weight can, the scale can so often like just scream over. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they don't even exist because that just bowled over everything. I think that can be really worthwhile to just take a break from the scale. Um, I also, and I found this really useful too, is to have people like, okay, so like I had a client recently, he weighed every Sunday morning, once a week, right? And so we just went through, okay, so here's what we're going to do before you step on the scale. You're going to spend some time in your head and go over the last week. What went well? What were my goals that I improved on? What's going better? How am I
Mm-hmm.
feeling? What have I changed? Like, so we just kind of build up all this information of I'm doing this better and I'm feeling better here and these have gone and I did this goal more often this week. And then we can step on the scale. First, when you've acknowledged all the other stuff that has gone well, because I think
Mm-hmm.
in that situation, then when you step on the scale, you can go, okay, maybe that doesn't reflect what I thought it might, but I've just gone through in my head, I've rehearsed all this information of other things that are going well. And that can really help kind of soften that blow a little bit if it needs to,
Yeah.
because we've put the emphasis on other things. And now this is just one piece of all the data. It's not all the data in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
both of those can work really well.
That's a great point. And that's something that I've noticed just listening to this back to the race to 270. The last thing I'll say is some of the things that both participants talk about, the guy who's trying to gain weight and the guy who's trying to lose weight, is this building of awareness and paying attention to how full am I, how satisfied am I, what are some ways to manipulate my
Mm-hmm.
eating habits in order to achieve these things, which to me is, I mean, regardless of what you think of the competition and the nature of it, that is probably one of the best, I guess, pieces of guidance that I can offer people is like, how can you build more awareness around some of, like, the one guy started realizing, like, man, he started taking interest in his coffee and the creamer and the amount he's drinking and kind of just started paying attention to that. Is this something that maybe I ought to think about changing? Could I get by with less, or would I feel deprived, or could I switch to a different product? Like, he just started kind of exploring different ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy who's gaining weight was like, yeah, I'm eating past my comfortable fullness, which is really big because people often don't think about that. They think about what they're eating. They don't
Mm-hmm.
think about the how and you know, paying attention to what your cues are telling you. And so the fact that he's talked about, I'm snacking more, I'm, intentionally eating past the point of fullness, and those kinds of observations and that awareness, I think is really, really helpful. For people to just take some notes on those kinds of things instead of just focusing on what is the end all be all to
Right.
drop the weight.
Right. Yeah.
So,
So really what we're saying is this weekend, spend some time and get a weight loss competition set up for your work starting Monday.
mhm,
Yeah. Dive
yep.
right in. Yeah.
And then, just waterlog the hell out of yourself. Drink a
Mm-hmm.
huge jug of water before the weigh in.
Don't worry about your
And
health.
yeah,
Yep.
that's not what we're saying at all. Actually,
Uh,
Michael's sarcasm is coming through.
whoops. Yeah. No. So I think there's there's absolutely a time and a place and a benefit to competition being done in certain ways with, parameters set around healthy things, set up in ways that they aren't going to further, how do I say that? They're not going to, like, make your relationship with food and yourself and stuff just even more damaging or trickier, that kind of stuff. There's absolutely ways to do that. But most of these things are not set up in that way. And I think most of these things are set up in a way that are, really clueless to the negative impacts that they can have on people, and how they can, just kind of, really wind up pushing people deeper into these really unhealthy beliefs.
Yep. Yeah. So that was kind of nice and cathartic too, because I think I've had a lot of frustration when I hear about weight loss competitions that I'm like,
Yeah, me too.
But if we talk a little more about,
what's really happening here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have a meaning in the mundane?
I sure do.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it's just a simple one. Just this morning I got up. I mean, our girls are usually awake before us a little bit. They usually wake up about 6:30, 6:45. I usually roll out of bed around 7:10, something like that. And I got up this morning, I came out into the living room, and Lila and Sophie, they get along well for the most part. They can fight and argue and that kind of stuff for sure. But they genuinely enjoy each other. But they don't spend a ton of time together, right? Like Lila's, there's a 5-year age gap, so they're interested in different stuff and that kind of thing. But anyway, I just came out this morning and walked into the living room, and they were both sitting on the couch, like snuggled right up together on Lila's iPad. And Lila was showing Sophie how to play this new game that Lila had got. And so and they were just so like into each other and being together and sharing something. And it was just like, this is the best stuff. Yeah, it was really sweet, really cute. Yeah.
I like that. That's a cute moment.
It was. It just that was the first thing I saw on the day. It was just like, okay. This is
I
gonna be
know.
all right.
That's a
We're off to
great
good
start to your day.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. How about you?
So for those of you who don't know, Matt and I are avid cribbage players, and we always love. We are.
Do you play cribbage? I love cribbage.
I love when people that I don't realize how many of my friends are totally into cribbage until we post pictures on Instagram when we play, and kind of.
That's right. So I remember that now.
Yeah. So when we share that we are, and we talk smack when we play each other, and we, have this like friendly competition. And I love when people share with me that they love cribbage too. So if listeners, if you're avid cribbage players, send me a pic or a comment.
Start a cribbage club.
I love it. So we sat last night. It was Matt's Friday because he didn't have to go into work today. And so it was just like a little more relaxed kind of atmosphere around here. And we played cribbage, and he, for his work, he shoots groceries, he takes photos and video of groceries. And so he brings home, whatever leftovers. And he brought home this really yummy cheese. We had some delicious wine from our friends, Dusty and Karin, and just had a really just chill, fun, lighthearted, simple night, just playing cribbage. And it was just lovely. I turned to him at one point and I was like, this is a really nice evening. And he's like, I know. Like, so through all of this, I mean, we joke too that through this pandemic, we're really lucky that we enjoy each other's company, because we would be screwed if we got on each other's nerves too much. Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of nice, after 10 years of marriage and a year of crazy pandemic lockdown, we still can just like sit over a cribbage board and do the simplest thing and enjoy each other. It was great.
Nice. I think I like that a whole lot. And I think nice is so underrated.
Oh yeah.
Like, people want like great and amazing and awesome and epic and whatever. It's like, man, if something is just nice, that's the best. Just like a nice evening or a nice conversation, man, nice.
And if it's easy, amazing. Like it's just
because nice is always easy. I think nice is just great. I like that. I'm
nice
happy
is
for you.
Great. That could be a tagline.
Nice is great.
Put that on a coffee mug.
Right. More merch.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you again for listening
Thanks,
and
y'all.
for making this podcast what it is. And we'll catch up with you next time.
Yeah. So as always, feel free to share, subscribe. We just got a new subscriber this week. I can't remember. I was going to remember their name and I lost it.
Uh-oh.
Oh well, I'll do it
Next
next
time.
week. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll pay tribute to all of our supporters on the next one.
And sharing, rating and reviewing us on however you listen, if you listen, rather than watch, we really appreciate that. And of course, down in the show notes, there's a link for if you'd like to support us, to be a listener support. There's a $4.99 a month option. And we also really appreciate that. So thank you for listening.
Yeah. Have a good day.